Welcome to the 4D Combatives Firearms and Defense Network in Tampa, Florida, with hosts Lane Andrews and Nick DiMatteo. On this podcast, we discuss firearms-related topics, including legal, tactical, concealed carry, as well as weapon and product reviews. We also discuss self-defense training as it relates to concealed carry. Our first sponsor is South Tampa Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. Learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts in a family-friendly environment from some of Tampa's best martial artists. Check them out at SouthTampaJiu-Jitsu.com. Our next sponsor is Nopiate Topical Pain Ointment, the toughest topical pain reliever for the combat athlete. Get back on the grind with Nopiate Pain Relief, found only at www.nopiate.com. That's NOPIATE.com. Next episode, starting now.
All right, here we are with the next episode of the 4D Combatives Firearm and Defense Network. I have with me today Sharir Richman. He runs an MMA school in Jerusalem called Team Richman, and he's also better known as the head instructor for ICCS, which is a Krav Maga organization. He's the guy, the owner, and really a great person that I've got to know over the last year. Sharir, say hi to our listeners.
Hello, everyone.
All right. And it's me, Lane. Nick couldn't be with us today, so I'm going to run with this interview solo. So Sharir, just tell us a little bit about your background, your military service in Israel, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, my background, I started martial arts actually when I was 6 years old. But I started, I did boxing, wrestling, and never stopped. I never stopped. When I was 18, I joined the Israeli military, recon demolition. I'm still in the military. I still teach for the military now. I'm teaching some of the special forces, hand-to-hand combat.
And that's any particular group of special forces you work with? If you can't say anything, if you
Yeah,
can't answer some of the questions, that's okay.
It's particular. I'd rather not say the.
Yeah, no problem at all. And just if you could just speak up a little bit more, just to make sure that everyone can hear you. So this weekend I did a seminar. Well, let me back up. Sharir did a seminar here in Tampa, Florida. It was 3 days of Krav Maga, and then on the fourth day we did some gun and knife.
It's called gun versus knife.
Gun versus knife?
Yeah.
Okay. I was out of town for the first few days. I had some MMA fighters fighting in Maine, but I got to take part in the gun and knife, and I thought it was a really eye-opening seminar in the fact that here in the United States, I don't know how many times I hear this, and I hear it both ways, right? I hear guys who train martial arts who say they don't need a firearm because they're a black belt, and then I have people, my uncle, in particular, this is just one example. He asked me, "Well, why are you shooting? Because you have a black belt." And my answer is always, there's more than one range to fighting, right? We talk about like 4D Combatives, which is the name of this podcast. What that stands for is 4 distances of combat, which is projectile range, which is, of course, weapons, firearms, arrows, whatever you want to use. There's striking range, there's grappling range, and then there's ground fighting range, when you're actually physically on the ground. So, but back to Sharir's seminar, it was really intriguing because the first thing that we did was we have our guns on us, the guns that we typically carry in the position that you would carry concealed. And somebody walks up to us with, they've got a rubber knife in their pocket. They're having a conversation. And they pull the knife, and it's our job to either get to our gun and try to neutralize the threat, or, defend the knife first and possibly either finish the threat with our hands or create some space and go for the handgun. So, Sharir, do you want to talk a little bit about that drill and what you've seen all over the world when you do these seminars?
First of all, let me back up a bit and say the course we did was more of an eye-opener. It's a one-day course. Less than that. A normal course like that would take 3 days. And I teach security in Israel, and without going through that course, they cannot work because in Israel they understand the importance of gun versus knife just because of experience we've had.
Knife attacks are
knife
very,
attacks.
very common there, right? Yeah.
Right. And so I start off the course. What I'll do is everyone in the course, I'm not a shooting instructor, so I'll start off saying that. I'm not here to teach you how to shoot. I'm here to teach you how to use your gun in real life situation.
Right.
There's a big difference between shooting balloons. I don't care how fast you can shoot a balloon and shooting someone who's actually running at you with a knife, or in worse, usually a knife attack is punching distance, real close.
Right.
So what I'll do is I'll start off, I'll say, okay, the guy has his gun on him, where he's used to carrying it, and I start off standing next to him, punching distance, and then just go at him with the knife as fast as I could. And most people, even martial artists, this is interesting, even people who've done Jiu-Jitsu, who've done Krav Maga, who've done, boxing, once they have their gun on them, they rely right on the gun.
Right.
And they go, both hands go to the gun, but I'm still stabbing him. And by the time he reaches the gun, an average person will get stabbed 10, 12 times.
Yeah, at least. And that's...
Upper body stabs, that's fatal.
Yeah, and you stop it then, right? So, in reality, it's not like I get to my gun. Let's say I shoot the person 2 times. It's not a movie, right? He doesn't fall down and collapse.
Right, that's another
dead.
thing. That's another thing.
He's going to keep fighting.
With adrenaline, up close, he could stab you a few more times, in many cases. Many cases that happens too. And then it's an eye-opener, and then people start to understand, okay, maybe there's something to it. Take a knife attack, for example. It's all the time close range, number one. Number two, a knife attack, by definition, is a surprise attack. Because if you knew the person next to you had a knife, you would not be, with simple logic, you would not be standing next to him and having a conversation.
Right.
You would, create the distance you need, or you would leave. So he attacks you first. So it doesn't matter if you have a gun on you. He took the initiative and started stabbing you. By the time you realize what's going on, you're already hurt.
Right.
And also many times it's in a small confined area. It's not in a football field.
Yeah.
So it can be if you don't know how to get to your gun, if you don't know how to create distance, it'd be very difficult to do it.
Right. And there are some situations where you can't create distance too, and you really just got to focus on defending the knife first.
Exactly. That's why, I say if a person has a gun on him for sports, that's okay. But if he has a gun for self-defense purposes, the gun is not the fighter, you're the fighter. I could fight with a gun, I could fight without a gun, right? And if you rely on the gun only, you're going to have a lot of trouble. You're going to have a lot of trouble. And that's why I started like that, just to prove that point to people. You have to rely on yourself. Yeah.
There are some times, though, and I think with that, you're not saying it, but I understand what you mean. The gun can put you at more risk.
Oh, absolutely.
On occasion,
absolutely, too. Because, we talk about the knife all the time, but what if it's just a fist fight?
Right.
Now, if it's a fist fight, you can't take your gun out. But the fact that you have a gun on you is a liability, because if the shirt gets pulled up and a guy sees the gun with emotions, it could turn into something very dangerous.
Right.
So maybe you're a great boxer, but now you're fighting 2 people, plus you got to realize that you have a gun on you.
Yeah.
And that changes everything. The way you move, the way you think.
Yeah.
Same thing if you grapple. If you fall to the floor and you have a gun on you, you have to remember that you have a gun on you. You can't. You're not on the mat with your friend. Now you have a gun on you.
Right. Yeah, so it's very different. And, I know I personally carry primarily for, active killer situations with my family. If we're going to the mall, if we're going to the movies, if we're going to these places where it's not just me I have to defend, it's several others. And it's a threat that hopefully you're not the first victim, because, if they shoot at me first, I'm probably in trouble. Hopefully it's something that I'm responding to or protecting my family from. I try not to carry my weapon when I'm in a situation where there could possibly be, it's funny, we're talking about this because this weekend I was with my fighters in Maine, and it's a bunch of MMA fighters staying in a hotel.
Yeah.
For the most part, everybody's pretty cool, but at the end of the day, you are around a bunch of fighters.
Right.
And I brought my weapon, as I typically do, but I made the conscious choice not to carry my weapon when I went down to the bar. And I know you're not supposed to mix alcohol and firearms and all that stuff. That's one reason. But the other reason is, man, if a fight breaks out here, I don't want to be the armed guy in a fight
Right.
with
That could be
the
a big.
potential
That's
of
a big
somebody
problem.
grabbing my weapon, or or the potential for me brandishing the weapon
Right.
when I'm in. None of those guys are necessarily going to kill anybody because they're going to want to fight with their hands.
Right, but emotions, you never know.
But emotions, you never know.
And not even like MMA fighters, maybe the one who use their hands, but in a street fight,
Right.
You don't know you know who he is. You don't know who the guy is.
Right.
And when emotions, when a person is angry, for that time he's insane.
Yeah.
For that short amount of time, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, there's I think it was I can't remember the name of the organization, but I was listening to their CD and they were talking about a 911 call that came in, and apparently it was a gentleman who was a concealed carry holder. He's carrying his gun. He gets attacked on the street. He gets thrown to the ground. He pulls out his weapon. There was a 7-minute struggle for the firearm. And you've grappled before, right? And grappling as hard as you can for 7 minutes is exhausting.
Very exhausting.
But if you're untrained on top of that, trying to grapple for 7 minutes, I'm sure this person by the end of that probably physically could not move, not carry. The bottom line is he got his gun taken away from him, and he died.
Oh, I know numerous cases like that.
Yeah.
I know numerous cases like that. A gun, also very important to realize, was not created to threaten people.
Right.
It was created to kill people. So if you're gonna take a gun out, in your mind, it's because you're about to shoot someone. If you take a gun out to threaten and you're bluffing, that could be very, very dangerous for you.
Yeah, and here in the States, that's a legal liability. If you take your gun out to threaten or brandish your firearm or fire a shot in the air, that's an act of aggression, and it's no longer self-defense.
In many countries I've been to, including Israel, if you get into a fight, a fist fight, and you have a gun on you, you could be charged with assault with a weapon. Even though you didn't draw it. Just because you have a gun on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's I don't know the laws, but many countries I've been to that was like that. I just had a dear friend of mine who was a Thai boxer, trained me years ago. Close friend. He lived out on a farm, and he used to have some trouble from the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And one day they came down to his farm, tried to burn it. Mm. And they had knives and axes.
Neighbors were ready to burn his farm?
Well,
yeah. Okay, those neighbors, yeah.
Yeah, those neighbors. And he came down. He's a tough guy. He was one of the toughest people I ever saw. Just a brawler. And he came down in his flip-flops,
Mm-hmm.
Just he thought I'll beat them off. And then he didn't realize they had knives and sticks and all that.
Right.
And his buddy came down with a gun. And when he saw that, he drew his weapon. And he was like, go where I'll shoot. But he hesitated. He wasn't shooting. And my friend was yelling at him, shoot. But he wasn't shooting. And sure enough, he got an axe right in his hand.
Mm.
They took that gun off the floor. They shot my friend, killed him. Mm. So,
So the buddy with the gun got an axe to his head.
No, not his hand.
His hand. Okay.
And that gun was picked up by someone else, and they shot my friend.
Shot your friend.
Yeah. Shot him dead. So, that's what the point is. You have to understand that a gun is created to kill. So if you take it out, that's for that purpose.
It's a tragic story, but it's a great story to illustrate the point is, well, a couple points. I think, one, it's a huge responsibility to carry a weapon around.
Right.
And I think sometimes it's taken for granted.
If you're going to carry a weapon around, so you got to be trained. It's your responsibility to be trained, not to think you're trained.
Right.
I think a lot of people either are not trained, and that's very bad because, dudes start training. But I'm talking about people who think they're trained.
Yeah. And
the fact that you could hit a target, a cardboard target, with a handgun does not mean you're trained, especially not with a handgun, because handguns were created for close range.
Right.
And most fights will be close range. And, you may think you're trained because you go to range twice a week. You take your time,
mm-hmm.
You close one eye,
mm-hmm.
you shoot the target, you blow up the balloon,
mm-hmm.
it feels great.
Mm-hmm.
But if I charge at you, up close and a surprise, that's a whole other world.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
So. Yep. and let's say you get 1 to 2 bullets off. Let's say one misses, which typically does, and you hit another one with either a lethal or a non-lethal shot. The fight isn't over.
Right. Right.
So even if the shot's lethal, it's going to take some time for that individual.
That's why you have to know how to shoot. I mean, just not you gotta shoot 5-6 bullets at a time.
Yeah.
You gotta know how to do that. You gotta know how to shoot and move.
Yeah.
Right. It's very difficult to hit the target. I've done. I work with the military, like I said before, and these guys are trained, and we have simulation bullets.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Well, you want to try to shoot me?" Right? Because they were shooting. They were showing off who's so fast with the balloons and stuff. I said, "You want to try to shoot me? Go ahead." I take a rubber knife from 1 foot away. I charge at them. They missed.
Yeah.
A lot of them missed me from pressure.
Right.
From pressure of having, another thing I'll do with them is I have one guy stand in front of the other guy with simulation bullets, right? So all the protection they have on is goggles, so they don't take their eyes out, but there's no vest, and it hurts. If you ever got shot with something, it hurts.
Yeah, I've been hit by something.
And what you do is like they have like a Wild West. You draw your weapon, shoot.
Right.
And that you see a great drill, all their technique goes out the window.
Right.
Because they're afraid of getting hit.
Right.
So they'll go, they'll drop, go one knee, miss.
Right.
If you're not aggressive, if you're not trained that certain way, you'll have a problem in reality.
Yeah. I would love to do sometime gun disarmament with sim rounds.
Yeah, we do that. That's what we do
when
we're trained. We do that back home.
I think that'd be great. Any issues with like the fingers getting stuck in the trigger guard, or do you
well,
cut
you gotta
those out for those?
no, you can't cut them out,
Yeah.
but you gotta. It's high level training. You gotta not so much the guy shooting, the guy who's disarming has to have a good feeling.
Right.
Because you don't want to take the guy's finger home with you.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So once you redirect the weapon and kind of get into position,
once you get in position,
you wouldn't jam the weapon back to him the way that we do. Okay. Well, that's that's neat, and I think that's missed. You're onto something with the people thinking they're trained. I don't know how many friends and people I run into. They're like, oh yeah, I have this weapon. I went to the range. I'm pretty comfortable. I can shoot like 2-inch groupings from 7 meters.
It's a false self of you feel confidence, but it's false.
It's false. Yeah.
Unless if you intervene in something that's happening,
mm-hmm.
Maybe you will be able to do something.
Right.
But many cases, not even the case because of the pressure.
Right.
And even shooting, forget about against a knife or against an axe in a fist fight with 5 people jumping on you. Even with shooting, you can shoot at the range when you take your time and you're breathing. Mm-hmm. What if I tell you, run, as fast as you can for a mile, then crawl for half a mile, then you have 5 seconds to shoot 5 bullets.
Right.
Would you hit the target then?
Right.
And if you don't hit the target then, at least 3 times out of 5, you're not good enough for a real fight.
Right.
Because even if you're not tired, the pressure that hits you when someone's shooting at you
mm-hmm.
is too much to carry for a lot of people.
Right.
And because of that, they'll miss even a normal fight, street fight, 50% of a person's technical capability out the drain, just because he's nervous.
Right.
So imagine what is in a shootout.
Yeah, this isn't the same as like war or street fight or shooting, but I mean, you see it all the time in martial arts competition.
Exactly.
You have fighters, you have people who compete in grappling tournaments and MMA, and a lot of times when they go out to fight, they don't look like the same fighter in the gym as they
especially
do
not their first fight
on the stage.
You could tell him before his first fight, it's going to be rough. It's not what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
Expect to get tired,
Right.
And it's always a shocker. It's always a shocker.
Yeah, they're always surprised how exhausted they are.
Right.
Yeah, I remember my first few fights, and you go sit down on that bench after the first round, and you're thinking in your mind, like, my God, how am I going to go 2 more of these?
Yeah.
How do I keep going? You get up and you go anyway, but it's a terrible feeling to be that exhausted.
Right.
Yeah. So that's that's good stuff.
And there's so many stories and examples I have for this. People who are trained with firearms get killed with a knife.
Yeah.
Or something else, or it gets taken away from them.
Yeah.
Because of lacking of combining the training together.
Well, man, after training with you this last year, I've got a whole new respect for knife fights and knife defense. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit just about knife defense, and I'll just lead off by saying, I think one of the first seminar that I did with you, I think it was like last August when you first came in, or maybe it was in the spring. I don't remember for sure. Yeah, I think it was in the last spring. Of course, the knife drill is an eye opener because you're just shocked how many times you get stabbed before you can actually control the knife. But I think the other thing that's a real like dose of reality is that normally a lot of times a knife attack doesn't come from the front anyway. You're stabbed in the back a few times, and you probably don't even know that it's a knife.
I wrote a blog about this.
That stabbed, yeah.
The myth of the straight line.
Yes.
Going back again for a gun for a second, you have a lot of guys you see on YouTube who draw their weapon against a knife, and the guy's running at them in a straight line. It's relatively easy. An attack, an ambush, whatever, is never in a straight line.
Right.
It's always from the side, different angles. In fact, you missed it. You weren't here this week. We were practicing that a lot in this seminar. Getting used to angles and fighting off different angles against a knife. Now, as I said before, a knife attack in a street fight will be the biggest problem. Because if you're tough, if you train boxing, any full contact, so you're used to contact.
Right.
Which that's the most important thing in a fight. You get used to contact.
Right.
Right. But a knife attack is the biggest problem because, you're in a big tactical disadvantage here. Even if the guy's smaller than you, he has a knife, and also, like I said before, it's a surprise attack. You would not, if you knew he had a knife, you would not be standing next to him. You can't argue about that.
Right.
So he attacked you first, and it's not in a straight line. Many times it's from behind, and many times a person getting stabbed doesn't even realize what's going on.
Right.
He just says, I thought he's hitting me." I have this scenario training we do, and one of the scenarios, I get two guys leave the room and come back, and we plan a scenario, and one of them is they just start arguing with, like, let's say 5 or 6 people. Normal thing happens every day, and then a fist fight,
Right.
And then as they're fighting, one of the guys pulls out a knife, starts stabbing them. Not one time, and I'm doing this for years, not one time they notice a knife.
Yeah.
It's just too hard, it's too difficult.
Right.
The point is, not to make people feel better in training, as a lot of in martial arts or, quote unquote self-defense places, to like make you feel full self-confidence, like I'm a ninja, I can stop a knife.
Right.
You cannot stop a knife.
Right.
Once you're more alert, so you have more respect for it.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I really like the philosophy of attacking the knife. Because a lot of times
there's two principles.
There's the defending the knife, right? Everybody wants to defend the knife, defend the knife.
Against the knife, there's 2 things you can do. Number 1, you got to attack the hand with the knife. Number 2, you got to control it. That's all you can do.
Right.
If you think in terms of defense, you're going to lose. Right? And it's a big thing. A lot of people say, they teach self-defense or we're going to go train self-defense. I don't teach self-defense. I teach fighting. Self-defense is a legal term. And Krav Maga, was created in the beginning for the Israeli army, right? And Krav Maga in Hebrew doesn't mean self-defense. It means contact, combat. That's the opposite from self-defense.
Right.
You're looking for contact.
Right.
And if it's with your weapon, you charge. If it's without your weapon, you charge. It's the same exact training, right? And when you say to a person, especially, for instructors who are listening, if you say to a guy, you got to defend yourself, he's always going to be the number 2. And there's a saying in military, line of defense is always going to get breached. You can't win by defense. That's why the first thing you'll teach an infantry soldier is to charge forward. He gets an ambush, you shoot back, and then you charge. Because if you stay where you are, if you defend yourself, that's exactly what the enemy expects you to do.
Right.
But if you charge forward, you're taking him out of his comfort zone. You're forcing him to defend himself, and that's the way you can win the fight. Because you got to get the advantage back. Plus, anything you do, if you're pretty much dead anyway, is a bonus. But if you stay where you are, you're dead for sure.
Right.
Same thing with a knife. If the guy attacked you with a knife, you weren't expecting it. Now you realize you're in a knife fight. You can't run away. If you put your hand up to block things, every time the knife is going up and down, it's cutting your hand, cutting your chest, cutting your head. There's only so much you could take. But if you fight back, you increase your chances of survival big time. I've seen it happen many times with people who I know or stories who I've heard or things things that I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I've been, and I have several I have a black belt, second degree black belt in karate, a black belt in taekwondo. Of course, I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. But one thing that really made me kind of buy into your system, because I've seen Krav Maga before, and quite frankly, I've never really been that interested because I would watch a lot of the knife defense, and I'd be like, all right, that's bullshit. Okay, why are you, or even the gun defense, why are you grabbing the gun and then punching the guy in the face? I would say that. Why you got to focus on the weapon, and a lot of that comes through like just understanding the principles of control primarily through jiu-jitsu. Is
Right.
like, okay, I understand you can't control somebody's arm like that.
Right.
And you're not gonna, it's just not gonna work.
Right.
So when I met you and started training with you, I liked the fact that your system was simple. I think sometimes instructors feel like they need to have more answers and need to get more creative.
Right.
But it's not like actually proven stuff.
Well, there's a lot of BS in the martial arts community.
Yes, 100%.
Especially in the self-defense community.
Yeah.
And a lot of people call themselves Krav Maga, and they're not.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is because what I found is in the self-defense community, it's all theoretical.
Right.
So you could argue all you want, right?
Yeah.
And you can say, I could do this, and I could do that.
Yeah.
You can say, I'm a killer, but they don't even spar.
Right.
Imagine going into an MMA gym. Imagine someone coming into your MMA gym and he's saying, I'm a world champion. Prove yourself. Go ahead.
Right.
Fight.
Right.
But they don't have to do that because, no, I don't spar because I'll kill you.
Right.
That's a load of bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And when I created ICCS, we came along and we do spar. Yep. And we go full force in every single attack. First we'll do our technique slow, but then we test it. We go full force. And if it doesn't work, we'll make it better. We'll change it. We'll throw it away.
Yeah.
And it's not about ego. It's about saving lives.
Yep. No, that's good because, a lot of your self-defense, another thing that I really like about it is it's about getting your opponent off balance.
Right.
Especially when they have a weapon.
Right.
Because, if you allow your opponent to stay on balance, they can still set up their attack. They're able to retract. If it's gun defense, they're able to pull the gun away. If they've got good balance and a good base. If it's a knife defense, they're able to continue to stab you full force. If you're just kind of standing there,
you can't fight when you're off balance.
Yeah.
You can't fight when you're off balance in the ring. You can't fight when you're off balance anywhere. So that's the idea. You got to hit him off balance.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of these techniques. You've seen, I'm sure, where they try to do a gun disarm and the guy's still standing static.
Right.
So of course you can just pull his hand back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reason why everything works on YouTube or in the gym is because your training partner is not resisting.
Right.
So it's choreographed. It's like a movie.
Right.
But if it's not honest.
And there's like a social contract to cooperate.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this and you're gonna do that.
Right.
But you could be doing that for 20 years, and you're wasting your time. You do Zumba, you lose some weight. Because you're into a big surprise. And
I've seen Zumba?
I'm a Zumba instructor.
Yeah, I could see that. Google Sharir Richman online and tell me if he looks like a Zumba instructor. So anyway, yeah.
But no, I've seen a lot of times. I travel the world, teaching. Yeah. And if a person doesn't have ego, you can really learn something, know. And I always say, all right, who here has self-defense? Who has martial arts background? Everyone raises their hand. Okay, who thinks he can win a fight? Everyone raises their hand and say, who wants to try right now? Hands don't come up.
Right.
No, I can't. And then I'll take a knife. Well, I had this a few years ago. 20 instructors came over to Israel. Thousands of years between them of martial arts. I took a knife and I killed them all. And
right.
Knife. And then they were saying, "Oh, because you're a professional." First of all, that's a stupid argument.
Right.
Right. I wasn't doing anything special.
Right.
So that's why. So I said, okay, I have my gym is near a pool. I went over to the pool. My neighbor, I love him, and he has a janitor. And he never trained a day in his life for anything, He just hits the hammer all day long. Yeah. And I said, hey, I have a bunch of tourists here. Would you mind stabbing them with a rubber knife? He's like, sure. No agreements or anything. He doesn't know that he's supposed to let them. There's like a YouTube. It's funny. I saw it on YouTube. It's Jim Carrey, martial arts instructor. You see that one?
Yeah.
You're stabbing me wrong. Right?
Yeah. Those are good.
Right. So he just walks in there and he plows each and every one of them. and you can see in their eyes like, well, we was like for 20 years, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that happens a lot, and those experiences are important. It's just a shame that it takes people sometimes so long to get a realistic experience and a realistic view of what a knife attack is. And I go back to the off balancing thing because it seems like, okay, well, that makes sense. You knock a guy off balance, but a lot of arts rely on like grab and strike to quote unquote stun the opponent. And there's a time for striking.
Striking is the most important thing. It's the foundation of everything because no matter what, you're gonna have to strike the person.
Right.
But also, at the same time, you have to remember, you have to have respect for your enemy. Yeah. And the fact that you punch him in the face when he has a knife doesn't mean he's going to stop. He has adrenaline. Same thing especially with a gun.
Yeah. Well, right? I tell my students in Jiu-Jitsu, it's like when somebody's got a choke from behind, it's as if you have a knife to your throat.
That arm is a weapon.
You've got to control that arm. If you can't control that arm, you're going to lose the fight.
Same exact thing.
And that. So of course, when you're talking about all this stuff in the knife fight, it totally resonates with me. Right. I'm like, 100%.
I don't have any problem selling. There is no escaping a choke once it's applied to a person who does full contact.
Right.
Right. People who do it, they don't really choke each other. Of course, they don't understand.
Right.
And that brings to another point: is if you're going to learn how to escape a choke, you got to know how to choke first. Right. You got to know what your enemy is capable of doing. If you're going to learn how to disarm a gun, you got to know how to shoot.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it comes together. You don't have to be the best shot in the world, but how can you learn how to disarm a gun if you don't know how to use a gun?
There's a lot of guys who know a lot of disarmaments who've never shot a gun.
They've never shot a gun before.
Yeah. You don't even understand how it functions.
Right. So that's in my eyes, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Because the first rule of the first act of war is, you know what it is?
No.
The first act of war is intelligence. How are you going to go into a gunfight not knowing how to use a gun?
Right.
It's crazy.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. I remember my first kickboxing fight, and I use the term kickboxing loosely. What it really was like a tough man competition, a 4-man tournament. We'd fight. Sometimes I'd be in fights where we'd fight 2 and 3 times a night.
Back in the day.
Yeah, this was striking only. This one was. And we walked out into this room. It was like in a Legion Hall, which is, they're pretty common around the States. Anyway, it's basically a place where a bunch of guys go hang out to drink beer. Well, they put a ring in the middle. And this time, cigarette smoke all throughout the room. So, like, as you're fighting, you're just inhaling cigarette smoke, right? But the idea of getting used to contact, because I was almost a black belt in Taekwondo at the time. Right. And, most of the contact there is very, very light. And, I hit you, good job, we're done. Yeah. And I'm not bashing, like, Taekwondo. It could be karate. It could be... And some of those guys train with more contact and less contact in their gym than others, But there's something really different when somebody's really coming at you 100% and there's zero cooperation for them. So I thought I was going to front kick this guy as soon as we came out. Okay. So that was my plan. I had a plan, where I was going to implement this combination and that combination. So the guy comes out and he was a bar fighter, and he just comes out swinging at me. So I throw my front kick, but I was used to kicking to a target, not through a target.
Uh-huh.
You understand?
Yeah.
So as soon as my foot hit him, I'm back on my heels, off balance, and into the ropes. Because I wasn't used to that aggression,
running into you like that
aggression coming at me. He wasn't dancing around trying to he wasn't playing any games. He was coming at me. I ended up beating him just because I was a better athlete.
Right.
But the fight didn't go down at all. Like I thought, I was so embarrassed watching the tape because it just turned into him slugging and me slugging the whole time.
That's a brawl.
Yeah, it just turned into a brawl.
There's a saying, I say this all the time, aggression always covers for the absence of technique.
Yeah.
Technique never covers for the absence of aggression.
Yeah.
So it comes down to that, many times it comes down to how bad you are,
Right.
If you add correct technique, of course, to aggression, then you're very dangerous.
Right, and you're very, very dangerous. Yep. Well, and people underestimate not only the ability to be aggressive, but how conditioned you got to condition your body to be able to sustain that aggression.
That's why sparring is so important.
Yeah. Sparring is important. The drills that you have people do where they're running and then hitting the mitts and then they're doing contact drills.
Getting
all
used
that
to working
important.
when you're tired is the most important thing.
Yeah.
First of all, and in reality you'll be under pressure. So the closest way you could simulate that is when your heart rate goes up when you're tired, and it's not just about getting you, if I'm training a fighter for a ring, of course I got to get his endurance up. He has to be a top athlete. But if I'm training a soldier or a security guard for a street fight, it's about him getting used to feeling like crap but still going forward.
Right.
That's very, very important.
The mental edge of being able to push through.
Because if the first
adversity.
time in your life you feel like crap is in the street, you're in trouble. Because people get nervous. Oh, I can't breathe. I can't. If you're used to that feeling, I'm not always in top shape of my life. I do powerlifting now. I love running.
You like donuts?
I love donuts. Yeah. I could run if I had to. But the thing is, I spent most of my life feeling tired and hungry and cold.
Right.
So it's not new to me,
Right.
It's my world. But that's very important. And the training is training under pressure, training where you're tired. Get used to that feeling. Embrace it. You should feel home there.
Right. No, that's great. There's one more thing I want to talk to you about that's a little kind of outside of the realm of Krav Maga and your organization. Is one time we were having a conversation about active killers, active shooters, whatever you want to call them. I know our friend Ariel loves the term active killer, which makes sense because it could be a guy driving a truck, could be somebody with a knife, it could be a sledgehammer, an axe, a gun,
could be anything,
or whatever. And response times, and Ariel just made a beautiful post the other day about response times and citizens being able to react instead of waiting on police because there's just no way the police can get there. But one thing I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we were having and if you can't talk about this, it's fine, but we were having a conversation once and you were talking about kind of like community groups that you have of former soldiers and some active soldiers who are first responders in Israel and who are pretty much in every community, and it's their responsibility to
I could talk about that. In Israel, you have many communities, and they spread out. And there were years of terror attacks on the communities. And the army realized something very simple. We can't get there in time. We could get there, but an attack, an average street fight is between 3 and 12 seconds. That's also the average knife attack. If you're still fighting after 12 seconds, you're probably the one winning the fight.
Right.
And the army realized, we can't be there, on time. So what they did is they created first response teams. Think about it in American terms. You have volunteer firemen.
Yeah. So
these are volunteer anti-terror units. That's how you can think about it.
Okay.
And they're in their communities, and the army supplied them with the weapons that they need. And they're anywhere they're in their community anyway, and they have the beepers. And if something happens, they're there first. They take care of the situation. And of course, the regular army, gets there relatively quickly. But in most cases, the army just gets there to collect the bodies.
Yeah.
And it works great. It proved himself. And ICCS, my organization, one of my instructors, Moshe, back home, great guy. He's an instructor for all these units through ICCS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's I think that's a beautiful idea. I'm not sure that Americans would stomach that well, but I think we need to. I also don't think that Americans kind of understand the necessity for something like that. I don't think we've been pushed quite far enough yet. I don't understand why we think that way, but I know like a lot of our citizens would be worried about having some dude with an ego who thinks he's like the neighborhood watch guy who any kid walking down the street he harasses. That's not really the case with what you guys do. This is something totally different,
They're just
right?
normal people with their day jobs.
Yeah.
But if something happens, they're in that area anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always your job, I think, as a citizen to look for something suspicious.
Right. They're all ex-military, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They get trained.
Yeah. They're trained professionals. They're not kind of like wannabe.
I think also in America, not only in America, but all over the world, the citizens don't know really what to look for. So they just they just get nervous, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you know what to look for, if you know, if you understand suspicious behavior and different signs for that, it'd be easier for you to.
So let's go through. I think you talked about these yesterday, kind of the steps for suspicious behavior, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, okay, no problem. You have a few signs. Now, this doesn't mean that if you see one of these, it doesn't make him necessarily like a terrorist, you know.
Right.
But if you were a good citizen, you could alert police for that, or just at least walk away. First sign would be something in his appearance and clothing, right? Something that doesn't quite fit in. You know, simple example. You know, if you're on the beach and everyone has a bikini and a bathing suit on,
Mm-hmm.
and you see a guy with a trench coat,
right,
that doesn't fit in. Now, that doesn't mean that he's here to make trouble, but it does mean that if I was a cop working there, I would walk up to him and I would speak to him and I would expect to get a normal answer out of him.
Right.
So that then I can know, okay, he's not suspicious. You must attack the suspicion.
Right.
Right. So the first thing is in clothing, or an appearance. That's the first thing I would look for because that's the thing that sticks out the most.
Right.
To people. The second thing, and a lot of times the suspicions in reality, if it's a real bad guy, is at least two of these suspicions come together. So the second one, let's call it nervousness, or he's hyperactive. He's pacing. You know, like you have the fighters are pacing in the ring before the fight.
Yeah.
Same thing, pacing, wiping sweat. So imagine you see the same guy with the trench coat, but he's also pacing and wiping sweat. That's a little more suspicious.
Right.
Right. The third thing will be the opposite from nervousness. It's called weirdness, tunnel vision. So he's blocked out he blocked everything out. He just sees his target. That's all he sees. Okay, so it's like fighters in the ring. You have one guy who gets the tunnel vision, one guy who's pacing because they're about to go into war.
Right. Both of them are responding to those nerves differently.
Exactly. Then you have another thing I like to call. You know, it's just this is an important one. Feeling, gut feeling. If you have a feeling about a certain person, but you can't explain why, just like, you know, I have a hunch.
Yeah.
Go with that. Go with that. You know, if you have to walk the other side of the street, do that. You know, don't be afraid of like, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or anything.
Yeah. I do that all the time with my wife. We'll be walking someplace and I'll be like, let's cross the street.
Yeah.
You know, nothing against the person.
Right.
You know, I've been in some bad situations in my life, and I'd like to avoid them. And if that means hurting somebody's feelings, and you know, looking at somebody differently who fits, you know, a certain description. You know, like if I see somebody who's in some old clothes and everybody else is in nice clothes where we're at, like, man, I hope you get some food today, but you know, I'm going to walk my wife and my kids to the other side of the street.
It brings, you know, it's about avoiding. And we always, as martial artists, especially we do reality training, we always talk about fighting, but it's much easier to avoid a fight than to fight.
Yeah.
Right? So let's go back to the suspicious patterns. All right? We have another one who, if you see two people who, to you, obviously they're together.
Right.
But they're hiding the fact that they're together. That's suspicious.
Right.
Like one walking on one side of the street, one on the other, and they're like signaling to each other, or they're on the same train, but they're on their phone to each other. Strange.
Right.
That deserves a second look. Why they're doing that. So you have to attack that suspicion of what's going on there. Okay. Another one. This is more for people who work on police or security. If you have intelligence, you know, as a guy with blue jeans, you know, blue shirt, green hat, and then you see a guy blue jeans, blue shirt, green hat. There's many guys like that. Doesn't mean it's him.
Right.
But that's suspicious.
Right.
It has to
be. Right. Doesn't mean you go up and shoot the person in the head. You know, that's an overreaction. But
exactly. No drama.
Yeah, no drama. But you might want to go ask him a few questions.
Right. And then the last one would be, you know, you see a guy with like an antenna coming out of his bag, and you hear like the tick-tock of a clock, and you know, you smell something strange, and he has heavy. Same thing with a car, you know, you see the car is heavy and strange and it's parked illegally. Somebody doesn't care about that car. That's very strange.
Right.
That's suspicious.
Right.
Yeah. Well, those are the basic patterns you look for.
Yeah. That's good. Well, and I thought an interesting story you shared yesterday was the guy with the suitcase who had the wires coming out of it, who ultimately had a pacemaker on.
Yeah.
That can cause a lot of people to get really nervous.
So this was years ago in Jerusalem, and there was a lot of suicide attackers then, and there was this unit would work for it, trying to find last stand because they were
right.
And so looking for suspicious behavior, and then one guard, he walking towards a bus stop. There's maybe 30 people in the bus stop, and he sees a guy with a wire coming out of his briefcase going up his sleeve.
Right.
And he pulls out the gun. He's shouting, "Everybody down!" He shouts, "Drop the briefcase!" And by that time, another guy came with a weapon, both shouting at him, "Drop the!" And then it turns out it's a heartbeat.
Yeah.
That was pretty bad.
Yeah. But it's also important that someone recognize that, and of course, in this situation, it wasn't a bomb or whatever else, but it's okay. I think a lot of people feel embarrassed, or they don't want to make a big deal out of something, or they don't want to be, they don't want to look like they're profiling or being racist or any of those things.
We're having troubles right now in Israel with random knife attacks or active killers with cars. Interesting point is that I would say 99% of these attacks are stopped by civilians.
Right.
They're stopped by civilians who either carry a weapon or just jump on him. Just last week, there was an active shooter, actually, who was stopped. He was hit over the head with a sewing machine.
Yeah.
By a civilian.
Yeah.
That's important to understand.
That's a beautiful story to end on, because I think I made a post about this a few weeks ago, that, it's really up to us as civilians to stop these attacks.
Right, because no one's going
to be there. We have to be aggressive. If you're going back to like the defending versus attacking mentality.
Exactly.
If you run and you hide and there's no place else to go, you're already dead. You got to fight. And if people swarm these attackers,
if the mentality is go forward,
you're
going to minimize the damage big time.
Yeah, you're going to minimize the damage. Yeah, beautiful. All right, Sharir. Well, hey, thank you very much, man. It's always a pleasure. It's been a great couple of days hanging out with you.
Thank you for having me, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's we need to Sharir. Also, if you own a martial arts school and you're interested in Krav Maga seminar, or potentially interested in becoming in one of Sharir's affiliates, you can reach out to him on Facebook. It's Sharir ICCS.
Sharir R ICCS.
Sharir R ICCS. Any other social media that you
use? You can check out our Facebook page, Israeli Contact Combat System.
Okay.
That would be the best way.
Okay. Great. So Israeli Contact Combat System. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you have any comments or questions, ask below. And don't forget to check out our sponsors.